Hello. The purpose of this video is to conduct a short lecture on planning and zoning. So, at this point, you did already a short research activity to gather your pre-programming information for our lot. And we found out that our lot is within a special planning district, and you have already researched all the requirements regarding parking, setbacks, design guidelines, and all that stuff. So, city planning and zoning is an important part of the design process because this one gives us an overview of the future plans or plans to maintain character and preserve something that's important for business or for culture within that city or maybe county. Plan review is a process where you would have to go to the city government under their building department and get a quick review, not quick as in one day, but basically present some plans and get approval on a schematic portion. Now remember that the first thing that you need is your lot address or your parcel number so that you can do your research or inquiry to gather your pre-programming information. You would have to meet with your client maybe several times to get their needs and wants. And once you have that, you'll generate your programming matrix or space planning. And all of that one leads to what a schematic design would look like. So, schematic design includes site plan and floor plan. And before you can go to the next stage of the design process, you need to do a plan review process with the planning department of your city. And I provided a city a website here, and when you click on that one, it should bring you to City of Sacramento plan review, and you can see here what they want. You can read through this one, what they want to do in terms of submitting. And ever since we had COVID, things got changed. Before we can just do a over-the-counter plan review, and they still would do that. However, they want to pre-review everything first, so you can look at that one. But there is a process in place to do a plan review with the city. Okay, so after schematic design, you would have to go through the plan review process, get things approved before you actually go into the design development, which includes your um, floor plan layout, your elevations, roofing, and then you go to finalize everything with your engineers and then do your construction documents before you actually go into the construction phase. Okay. Now, on the schematic design, which is after your programming, or in some cases, schematic design is actually part, or programming is actually part of schematic design, that there is a back and forth process between you and the client to get approval for the site plan and to get approval for the building layout in terms of room assignments, size of rooms, layout of rooms. So you have to go through your client, and you this is a cycle. And once everything is approved, then you go to the next phase, which is the design development. So within the schematic design, you and the client are working together. You as an architect and the client's working together. You might pull in your landscape architect so that you would have a visual knowledge of um, where to put trees, and if you have like a pool for a house, or if you have a fountain or artwork for big projects, you'd also want to pull some information from your civil engineer about drainage and stuff like that. Okay, sloping, if there are any underground pipes that's in the site or any easements. You do want it to have your client approve your design. After it gets approved, you would have a very rough or basic estimate of how much the project would cost. and you do want to get this one approved by the planning department. Okay, so the schematic design process, and once you got that approved, and they would stamp your schematic design approved, um, looking at setbacks, looking at the type of building that you want to create. So you will get that approved, and then you go to the next phase of the project, which is the design development. Now, um, you're pulling in your consultants, which is your structural engineer, mechanical engineer, plumbing engineers, and if it's a big building, you might need sprinklers, so you have to pull in your fire protection consultants. Um, and the main objective of this design development is to basically prepare and coordinate all requirements from your consultants so that when you present this um, design to the building department, that there would be no or very, very little revision when they do their review. You also want to meet code at this stage so that when you finally go to the construction documents and present that to the building department, that it's not going to have a major revision, which is going to be costly and expensive in terms of man hours to redraw stuff. So at this point, you also wanted to have a more detailed construction cost because at this point you would probably know um, lumber or concrete that needs to be used, volumes of concrete, any steel. So you might have a better estimate compared to a per square foot estimation on during the schematic design process. The client will also have to review the design and its cost because it might be over budget, and then you have to like maybe reduce the size, get rid of things like actual materials you're going to use. So this is called value engineering. You want to like sort of adjust the construction or a planned construction of your design so that it would fit the client's budget. Okay. And we go to the next phase. Next phase is actually doing now construction documents where you're going to put it in uh, a title block, putting measurements or dimensions on it, putting notes, putting legends of walls and assigning them rating, making sure that you've satisfied code in terms of hallway widths, location of windows, how much opening or how wide the windows are. So all of your teams are involved, um, and the main objective is this of construction documents because you're going to present this to the building department is that you are meeting code, and your building is physically uh, capable of being constructed. So the milestones are obviously you're going to present this to the building department and you're going to get approved. And then during this portion, if it's a large project, then you would have contractors submit their bids on it. And at the very end, once you have selected a contractor, you're going to award that to the contractor and you're going to generate a contract. And now, the last stage of this process would be construction administration. The building is being constructed, carpenters, plumbers, electricians are there. And from time to time, you as a architect and your design team, which is your consultants, your engineers, are going to have to make site visits to help clarify, to the general contractor or the contractor things that were not clear in the building. Or, for example, if it's a renovation, that there would be some existing ductwork or plumbing that wasn't part of the plans, and you now have to go around them. So the contractor, whenever there is a conflict or there is something unforeseen, will always have to call you, and you may go do a site visit to do some administrative work or administration of basically what needs to happen to the building. You are looking for the welfare of your client. You're overseeing the construction percent if they're on track also. And you're also looking for um, mistakes that the contractor might have done, or because you put it in the plan and the contractor filed your plan that um, you found that it was a mistake to do some detail that way. So you might have that problem. Um, anyway, this would be like the last portion, and you just want to construct the building per plan, but also manage to fix the any problems during construction. So on all these phases, there are two departments in your city that oversees this construction. One is called the planning department, and one is called the building department. And they have two different roles, but they're under like one department, which is called the uh, building department. So the planning department is like actually part of the building department, and they are just separated by tables. Um, so the planning department's job is to review uh, the portion at the early stage of the project, which involves site plan, um, land use, um, and for big projects where there's actually no plan yet, that a developer will buy a big tract of land and would like to develop that for like a subdivision, and would like to get approval from the planning department, and that's called this process is called entitlement, where the planning department approves this for a specific use like subdivision and what's the density, and then the owner of that lot will actually sell it to another entity, which might be a home builder or even to another developer, and he would probably buy it for like um, $10 per square foot, and once he got it approved with the planning department, that he could probably sell it for like $100 a square foot or something like that. Okay. Now for some areas of the city or the county, which are actually already zoned, if you want to, let's say, put in a gas station, and that land on the corner close to the freeway was previously designated as a agricultural land, you want to put up a gas station, then you have to go through a variance. And this variance, you would have to go through and get approval from your neighbors if there's other agricultural landowners besides your land. You will have to get their approval. You would have to show that they have no objections to what you wanted to do. You might have to go through the city's planning and design commission and present your variance or your application. And this is like a small courtroom event. You got your um, design or planning commission, and you have either PowerPoint slides or boards to show what you wanted to do. And interested parties can attend that because it's going to be posted up, ahead of time to what's the agenda. And some of these people might have objections, and they will all hear everybody's opinion and take on it, and then decide whether they want to approve your variance or your application or not. You might also have to go through a historic commission, where if you have like an area in the city like Oak Park, where there are very old buildings and they want to preserve the historic look of the buildings, you might have to go through it and present your design in front of them. If it impacts some business or traffic or something like that, you might have to go through actually the city council, because your project might impact employment, might impact traffic, and the city council will probably be involved with your application too. Now there is also nowadays a environmental quality commission, or based on the California Environmental Quality Act, um, for large project development where sometimes you want to create a hospital, or you want to create a casino, or you want to create a industrial complex, that you have to go through some state agency where they would study the environmental impact of your project. So if you only have like a small restaurant that you want to build it, you might typically you don't go uh, through the agency that have to evaluate your environmental impact. So let's summarize the um, role of a planning department from the building department. So I told you before, planning department is under the building department. They're separated by table. But the planning department only looks at whether you're compliant with the municipal code, the general plan, the community plan and design guidelines. That's planning. It You do have to present, site plans and floor plans to the planning department. They have to approve that, and then it will go to now the building department, which will actually look at your compliance, whether your building is safe, properly distanced, materials that you use are combustible, non-combustible in terms of occupancy. Um, they would have to look at the electrical code, which includes using LEDs now, or what kind of bulbs you're using and stuff like that. Mechanical codes, which includes your air conditioning and energy requirements too. So these three, mechanical code, plumbing code, and energy code, they all are sort of working together. And typically, the mechanical and the plumbing are it's just one consultant. Uh, fire splink Fire sprinklers would go through your plumbing, um, and the mechanical consultant usually handles also ductwork and plumbing at the same time. And they have to work closely with the energy code, where their equipment are basically energy efficient, that the lights or their lighting uh, equipments or lighting bulbs are actually energy code compliant. Um, for some occupancies of building, which we will discuss at a later time, they have to also see that it meets fire code. For institutions or commercials of certain size and occupancy, there is actually a need for sprinklers. And so the fire code explains that too. As an architect, the fire code is something that's typically embedded with the building code, where type of construction and details are going to be established, and they will have a UL approval code that would say that this kind of construction is a 2 hour rated wall, a 4 hour rated wall, in terms of in case of fire, if you needed to have a hallway as an emergency exit, and that hallway should be like 2 hours or 4 hours, and it might require 2 layers of chipboard, or maybe require concrete before it can be approved. And then you have now the Green Building Code, which looks at recyclings, what material you're using in terms of insulation, what kind of lumber needs to be used, or what approval or what rating lumber you have there. So the building department is in charge of all of these, and make sure that what you submit to them would satisfy all of these codes. Okay. Now, the shortcut, plan department is all about land use density and protection of land values, while the building department is all about making sure that your building is safe for the public health, and which includes, disabilities. People with disabilities would have to be safe accessing your building, that hallways meet their needs, and that's all about public health and safety. So you might be wondering at this point, why do these two kinds of review happen at different stages in the project? And I want to credit the last teacher teaching this course. He presented some historical facts, because in 1915 New York, uh, a building for a large corporation, Equitable Life, created or erected a 40-story building in Manhattan. And because land was scarce, or in terms of density, is that land has been sold off and is now expensive, that they wanted to occupy most of the land. So what they did was they constructed a building that uses every square inch of the lot. And as you can see here, it's massive. It's very, cubic and rectangular, uh, because they wanted to utilize the land. And what it did is it blocked off a lot of sunlight in the streets. And New York, sometimes it goes and becomes very cold and whatever. So if there's no sunlight during those winter months, the street is going to be very very cold. And so next year, the city created the first ever law or code that required setbacks. Um, and because it's in the city, that you cannot have like 10-foot setbacks from your property line, that they actually created what we call a tapering design requirement. Okay, tapering design requirement is that before buildings can just go straight and occupy all of the land, understanding that the land is valuable in Manhattan, New York, they would still let you occupy the land, but as you go up, you need to taper your design and become smaller as you go up, so it doesn't look massive like this one. Okay, so when you say tapering, it looks like a wedding cake where you have a large, base, and it goes smaller on top. And here's one of an examples of a tapering design. The Empire State Building would occupy most of the block, but as it goes up, it would be smaller in area, and this is called tapering design. And here's an early photo of the New York skyline, Manhattan. And you can see, I think this is the building over here. And you can see some of the buildings that were pre 1916 ordinance. This one is pre 1916, but some of them, and you can see that they're all now tapering in their design. Okay, so it's either from the very bottom, that you don't occupy all your property, that you have a setback, then you can go straight up, because you are not occupying your whole land. But if you are occupying your whole lot, when you go up, you need to like taper your design. Okay, so when we talk about a building, or typically high rise, or even 2, 3, 4 stories, we're talking about what is the impact of your building towards your environment. And we're talking about your building envelope. And your building envelope includes the height of the building, the roof floors, the walls. And you could talk about that. You have a smaller building envelope if you have a setback, because if you don't, then you're occupying a whole block or lot, and it would create a wall. of buildings that would block sunlight, would block views or anything like that. And in some portions of the city, that they wanted to create a wall between, let's say, the business business district and residential. So in some cases, they want a an envelope that creates a wall separation. Um, so setbacks are important. It makes the building envelope smaller. So you would see this in residential areas. Um, so mostly cities would have adopted some kind of zoning so that you have residential areas that has smaller envelope spaces to put greenery like trees and shrubs, um, and then zonings so that the ugly steel industrial zones where you have furnaces that blow smoke, would have requirements of how high the chimney would be, so it's not low here, and the smell or the smog created by these furnaces are going to be way high, because you don't want this two kinds of zones very close to each other. The quality of life and your residential area is going to go down. Nobody wants to live there next to the industrial zones because uh, first the view is bad, and then they may produce some smell that's unpleasant. And that's why you would see dilapidated areas surrounding industrial zones, is because nobody really wants to live there. So zoning codes have been adopted to regulate, where people can build what they want. Um, but there is an exception. One state, Texas, or one city in Houston, does not have zoning codes, and they were attempts to create zoning codes, and I believe up to now there is no zoning code in the city of Houston. And when you do visit Houston, you would see high rise next to residentials, and typically, um, s- these kinds of residentials, you want to be certain distance away from them, uh, maybe 500 feet away, that you can only put a high rise on it, or besides residential areas or something like that. And so you would see roller coasters beside residential areas. You would see industrial facilities besides residential areas, and that's unsightly. You don't. This would produce a lot of noise, and if you're like want to sleep at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. and they're still riding the roller coaster, that it would be very noisy. Or if you have a house and your backyard looks at this water tanks or whatever storage this is, that it would make your environment not pleasant to live in, because the site may be producing bad smell. So it is important to have zoning codes, because you don't want to have your house built uh, besides a parking lot. So obviously this house was here first before this parking lot was built, but because there are no zoning codes in Houston, you'd have this kind of situation. Okay, so for this week, you just have gone through some research activity to gather information for your pre-programming. Uh, this activity gave you firsthand insight about local laws and land use information. So you can present your site to the plan, or present your site plan to the building department, planning department, get it approved without any revisions. And if it is, there's very, very minor ones. So remind you again that some links that we have used are the Sacramento Planning and Development Code. We looked at the parcel viewer. We looked at the general plan from the city. And the key terms that we use are land use. If it's what kind of land use is it? I believe our project is a commercial C2, but it belongs to a special planning district, and so there's some additional restrictions and guidelines that we have. Density we talked about. Usually, this one talks about residential dwelling units. So Some lot lands you can put a duplex on or halfplex on it, but some lands you can't. So because they have a lower density, then you can only put in one uh, home in one lot. But if you have a higher density, you might be able to put a duplex in one lot. Floor area ratio, we talked about how big the building can be in terms of its lot. Um, so if you have a 6,000 square foot building on a 6,000 square foot lot, then your floor area ratio is 1:1. So that's one. But if you have a 6,000 square foot lot and you have a floor area ratio of 3, that means that you can have 18,000 square feet of building on it. And that's like a high rise or something. Okay. Some lots have a coverage requirement that you can't cover more than 50% of the land, or you can't cover more than 70% of the land. So that's lot coverage. So that's important also. And planning uh, would have to not approve any building plan that you have where it occupies more than what their desired lot coverage is. So the city's lots pretty restrictive, so that we maintain values, we maintain architectural design, quality of life, and everything like that. Okay, so that ends our lecture, and we're going to be having a quiz next time or next week, all about this lecture. So make sure you read through this one again. I will give you the PDF that I use for this lecture, and we'll see you next week. Well, that's verbally speaking. Okay? So, thank you very much.